The silent truth. Boston, 2:47 a.m., a message that changed everything. Ethan Graves had always believed that secrets could stay buried. For 10 years, he had built his name as one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Boston. He made problems disappear. He turned guilty men free. And most importantly, he never lost a case. But at 2:47 a.m., everything changed. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your wife is not who you think she is. Check your email." Ethan frowned. His wife, Lauren, was asleep upstairs. Or at least she was supposed to be. The email had one attachment. A video file. Ethan clicked it. And within seconds, his entire world collapsed. Plotline 1. The video that shouldn't exist. The footage was grainy security camera style. A hotel room. Dim lighting. And in the middle of the frame, Lauren. She wasn't alone. Ethan recognized the man instantly. Scott Hendricks, a federal investigator. The same agent who had been building a case against one of Ethan's biggest clients, Victor Kane. A powerful Boston crime boss. Ethan's stomach twisted. His wife was having an affair with a man trying to destroy his career. But then, Scott leaned in and whispered something to Lauren. Ethan turned the volume all the way up. And what he heard was far worse than betrayal. "Does he know?" Scott asked. Lauren shook her head. "Not yet. But when the time comes, I'll handle him." Ethan's breath hitched. This wasn't just an affair. This was a setup. Plotline 2. The missing puzzle piece. Ethan stared at the screen, his mind racing. Why would Lauren and a federal agent be discussing him? And what did she mean by handle him? He needed answers. He grabbed his gun, shoved his phone in his pocket, and headed upstairs. The bedroom door was slightly open. The soft sound of steady breathing filled the room. Lauren was in bed, her face peaceful, as if nothing had happened. For a second, Ethan hesitated. Did he confront her now? Or did he play along until he knew the full truth? His gut told him to wait. He needed to find out who sent that message. Because someone out there wanted him to know the truth. And he needed to know why. Plotline 3. A friend or an enemy? By morning, Ethan had run a trace on the email. It came from a burner account. Untraceable. But the text message? That was different. He ran it through his system. And within minutes, a name popped up. Natalie Carter. Ethan froze. Natalie Carter was a Boston journalist. A good one. The kind who dug too deep. And 3 months ago, she vanished. The official story was that she left the country. But Ethan knew better. Because Victor Kane, the man Ethan had just defended in court, had been one of her biggest investigations. Now, she was back. And she had just sent Ethan a warning. Plotline 4. The Web of Lies. Ethan met Daniel Hayes, his longtime investigator, at a small diner off the harbor. Daniel slid into the booth, setting his coffee down. "You look like hell," he said. "I need to find Natalie Carter," Ethan muttered. Daniel raised a brow. "You mean the woman who's supposedly dead?" Ethan slid his phone across the table. Daniel stiffened as he read the text. "Shit," Ethan exhaled. "Lauren's involved. And if I don't figure out how, I might not make it out of this." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "So what's the move?" Ethan clenched his jaw. "Find Natalie, and figure out exactly what my wife has been hiding from me." Plotline 5. The man who never lets go. Victor Kane wasn't just another crime boss. He was Boston's most untouchable figure. Powerful, wealthy, and ruthless. And Ethan had just won his case, keeping Kane out of prison for murder and racketeering. So when Ethan walked into Kane's private club, every head turned. The crime boss sat in a leather chair, a whiskey in his hand, watching the city skyline. "Mr. Graves," Kane said, smirking. "I didn't expect to see you so soon." Ethan sat across from him. "Did you send me that message?" Kane raised a brow. "What message?" Ethan studied him. If Kane was lying, he was damn good at it. "Someone wants me to know my wife has been working with the feds," Ethan said. "And I need to know who." Kane exhaled slowly. "That's unfortunate," he said. "For you, and for her." Ethan stilled. What do you mean? Kane leaned in, smirking. You just proved your loyalty to me in court. But your wife, she's been talking to men who want me dead. He swirled his drink. Now, I have a very difficult decision to make. Ethan's pulse pounded, because he knew exactly what Kane was implying. Lauren had become a liability, and when Kane had a liability, they disappeared. Plotline 6. A race against time. Ethan left the club with his mind spinning. He had two choices. Let Kane handle Lauren. Let the woman who betrayed him pay the price. Get to Lauren first. Find out the truth himself before it was too late. But before he could decide, his phone buzzed again. Meet me at Pier 17. Midnight. Come alone. Natalie. Ethan's heart pounded. Natalie was alive, and she was ready to talk. But as Ethan pulled away from the club, he noticed something. A black SUV in his rearview mirror. Following him. Watching. And then, his phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan answered. A man's voice, cold and emotionless. You should have left this alone, Graves. Then, the sound of a gun being cocked. And in that moment, Ethan knew. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about survival. Boston, 11:58 p.m. Pier 17. The ocean air was sharp and cold. Ethan pulled into the darkened lot near the docks, cutting the engine. His grip tightened on the gun resting in his lap. Natalie Carter was alive, and she wanted to talk, but someone else wanted him dead. He scanned the area. Empty shipping crates, flickering streetlights, the low hum of waves crashing against the pier. No movement, but Ethan knew better. Someone was watching. His phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. Walk to the end of the pier. You're not alone. Be careful. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he stepped out into the darkness. Plotline 7. The woman who knew too much. Ethan walked toward the edge of the pier, his pulse steady but alert. The figure stood near the railing, arms crossed. Natalie. She turned as he approached. A little thinner, a little more cautious than before, but unmistakably her. You're alive, Ethan said. Natalie smirked. You sound disappointed. Depends on what you have to tell me. Natalie studied him. I sent you that video because you're running out of time. Your wife, she's not just working with the feds. She's setting you up. Ethan's jaw tightened. For what? Natalie hesitated. For murder. Silence. The wind howled between them. Ethan didn't flinch. Whose murder? Natalie exhaled. Scott Hendricks. The Fed she's sleeping with. Ethan felt his stomach drop. That doesn't make sense. She's working with him. Natalie's eyes darkened. Not anymore. Ethan inhaled sharply. Natalie lowered her voice. Tomorrow morning, Scott Hendricks is going to be found dead in his apartment. And the evidence? It's all going to point to you. Ethan felt cold realization settle in. Lauren wasn't just cheating on him. She was framing him for murder. Plotline 8. The setup. Ethan's mind raced. The hotel meeting. The cryptic whispers. The look in Lauren's eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. It wasn't just an affair. It was an operation. Why? Ethan asked. Natalie exhaled. Because you're the only thing standing in the way of a case that could take down Victor Kane. Ethan stilled. I already won Kane's case. Natalie shook her head. You think it's over? Kane isn't just a crime boss. He's the key to something bigger. Something the feds want to control. And you? You're collateral damage. Ethan clenched his jaw. Then why warn me? Natalie hesitated. Because I tried to take them down once. She pulled up her sleeve. A jagged scar ran along her forearm. They made sure I wouldn't try again. Ethan exhaled. This wasn't just about Lauren. This was about something deeper. Something far worse than an affair. Plotline 9. The clock is ticking. Ethan knew two things. By morning, Scott Hendricks would be dead. And if he didn't move fast, so would he. Natalie pulled a flash drive from her pocket. This has everything. Emails. Transactions. Meetings between Kane, Hendricks, and the Bureau. If you want to survive, you need leverage. Ethan took the drive. And you? Natalie smirked. I've been dead once already. Might as well see how long I can stay that way. She turned to leave. But then, a red laser dot appeared on her chest. Ethan's blood went cold. Natalie! A single gunshot rang out. Natalie collapsed. Ethan spun, gun raised, but whoever pulled the trigger was already gone. Plotline 10. The escape. Ethan crouched beside Natalie. Blood pooled beneath her. She gasped, clutching at her wound. Run! She whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched. He had two options. Stay, try to stop the bleeding and risk getting caught. Run, and make sure Natalie's warning wasn't for nothing. More footsteps echoed down the pier. Ethan made his choice. He grabbed the flash drive, tucked it into his pocket, and disappeared into the shadows. Plotline 11. The wife who lied. By the time Ethan reached his house, his mind was in overdrive. Lauren was still inside, still pretending to be the perfect wife. Ethan stepped through the front door, forcing himself to stay calm. Lauren appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a robe, looking half asleep. Ethan? She mumbled. Where were you? Ethan studied her. The way she blinked, feigning confusion. The way her fingers curled around the railing, too tight, too controlled. Nowhere important, he said. Lauren smiled softly. Come to bed. Ethan's pulse pounded. By morning, she would try to have him arrested for murder. Or worse. For now, he had to pretend he didn't know. He had to play along. Because the moment Lauren realized he was onto her, it was game over. Plotline 12, the last warning. Ethan locked the bedroom door behind him. Then he pulled out the flash drive, plugged it into his laptop, and watched. Emails, meetings, bank statements, and then, a recording, a phone call, between Lauren and Scott Hendricks. Ethan pressed play. Lauren's voice filled the room. He won't see it coming. Ethan felt his stomach twist. Then Scott's voice. And if he does? A pause. Then Lauren whispered. Then I'll make sure he never talks. Ethan closed the laptop. His wife was going to kill him, and the only question left was, would he let her get the chance? Boston, 3:12 a.m., a choice he never thought he'd make. Ethan sat in the dark, his laptop screen casting an eerie glow across the room. The recording of his wife's betrayal still echoed in his head. Then I'll make sure he never talks. Lauren was planning to kill him. The woman he built a life with. The woman he trusted. And in just a few hours she was going to frame him for murder. Ethan exhaled, gripping the flash drive in his hand. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about revenge. And if Lauren wanted to play a game, she had no idea who she was up against. Plotline 13, the woman in the shadows. Ethan needed to move fast. By morning, Scott Hendricks would be found dead. And the moment the feds got their hands on Ethan, it was over. But first, he needed to know who killed Natalie Carter. There were two possibilities. Victor Kane found out she was talking. The FBI silenced her before she could expose them. Ethan didn't trust either of them. But right now, he needed someone just as desperate as he was. And there was only one person left. A woman known as Riley Knox. Plotline 14, the fixer. Riley Knox wasn't a cop. She wasn't a journalist. She wasn't even a criminal. She was something worse. Cleaner. A woman who erased people for a price. Ethan found her at a high-stakes poker lounge in the back of a Boston strip club. Riley sat at a private table, cigarette in one hand, whiskey in the other. When she saw Ethan, she smirked. Carter, last time I saw you, you were putting my clients behind bars. Ethan slid into the seat across from her. And now I need your help. Riley chuckled. That's ironic. What makes you think I won't sell you out instead? Ethan leaned forward. Because I know you don't trust Kane. And I know you hate the feds even more. Riley's smile faded. Ethan placed the flash drive on the table. I need to know who pulled the trigger on Natalie Carter. And I need to know fast. Riley exhaled. What's in it for me? Ethan's voice was cold. A chance to burn them all. For the first time, Riley looked intrigued. She took a sip of whiskey. Give me 2 hours. Plotline 15. The Framed Man. Ethan left the club and checked his phone. A breaking news alert flashed across the screen. FBI agent Scott Hendricks found dead in his apartment. His pulse pounded. It had happened. And any second now. His phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan answered. A gruff voice spoke. Mr. Graves, this is Special Agent Morris. We need you to come in for questioning. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. Questioning for what? A pause. Then Morris sighed. We both know what this is about. Ethan clenched his jaw. The trap had snapped shut. And now? He had to decide whether to run or fight. Plotline 16. The Wife Who Watched. Ethan drove home in silence. Lauren was waiting in the kitchen, pouring coffee like nothing was wrong. You're up late, she said, smiling. Ethan forced a smirk. So are you. Lauren sipped her coffee. Long night? She asked. Ethan studied her. She was too calm, too in control. She already knew about Scott Hendricks. She already knew the feds were coming for him. And she was enjoying it. Ethan set his keys down. Yeah, he said. One of the longest nights of my life. Lauren's smile never wavered. Good, she said softly. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be eventful. Ethan exhaled. She was waiting for him to panic. She was waiting for him to make a mistake. But Ethan didn't panic. He didn't break. He just smiled back. I'll see you in the morning. Then he walked upstairs and started planning how to destroy her. Plotline 17. The hit list. 2 hours later, his phone buzzed. A text from Riley. Meet me at the docks. You're not gonna like what I found. Ethan grabbed his gun and left. When he got there, Riley was leaning against her car, arms crossed. You're right, she said. Kane didn't kill Natalie. The feds didn't either. Ethan frowned. Then who did? Riley pulled up her phone and showed him a photo. A surveillance image from a traffic cam. Ethan stared. It was Lauren, standing in a parking garage, talking to a man Ethan thought was dead. Victor Kane. Ethan's breath hitched. No, he whispered. Riley smirked. Yeah, your wife? She's not working against Kane. She's working with him. Ethan felt his pulse pound. Lauren hadn't just betrayed him. She had played both sides. And now, she was about to win. Unless Ethan stopped her. Plotline 18. The endgame begins. Ethan clenched his fists. Riley exhaled. What's the play, Carter? Ethan stared at the city skyline. He had spent his whole life protecting criminals in court, twisting the system, manipulating the law. But now, the law couldn't save him. And if Lauren wanted to frame him for murder, then it was time to return the favor. We take her down first, Ethan said. Before she gets the chance to take me. Riley raised a brow. How far are you willing to go? Ethan's voice was calm. All the way. Because the woman he loved had become the woman he had to destroy. And by the time this was over, Lauren Graves was going to wish she had killed him when she had the chance. Boston, 4:22 a.m. No more playing defense. Ethan Graves wasn't a killer, but he was about to become one. For years, he had manipulated the system, twisting the law to free criminals who should have rotted behind bars. Now, the system had turned on him. His wife was working with Victor Kane. His name was on the FBI's suspect list. And in a few hours, federal agents would come knocking with an arrest warrant for murder. If Ethan wanted to survive, he had to strike first. Lauren wanted to frame him. She wanted him gone. Fine. But before she got her wish, she was going to learn the hard way. He wasn't the kind of man you could bury. He was the kind of man who buried you first. Plotline 19. The setup before the fall. Ethan turned to Riley, the fixer who had just given him proof of his wife's betrayal. I need everything you have on her, Ethan said. Riley raised a brow. You sure? You might not like what you find. Ethan exhaled. I already don't. Riley handed him a USB drive. Bank records, phone logs, private meetings with Kane. Your wife's been busy. Ethan plugged it into his car's dashboard screen. Within seconds, his entire marriage unraveled in front of him. Wire transfers, private offshore accounts, a life insurance policy in his name. Lauren wasn't just setting him up for murder. She was planning to kill him for profit. Ethan clenched his jaw. Where is she now? Riley smirked. That's the fun part. She pulled out her phone. Hit play on an audio recording. Lauren's voice filled the car. Tomorrow morning. The safe house. Make sure he never leaves. Silence. Ethan stilled. The safe house. Lauren wasn't just planning to frame him. She was planning to end him personally. He exhaled slowly. Then I guess I better get there first. Plotline 20. The safe house that became a trap. 5:37 a.m. A quiet, abandoned building on the outskirts of Boston. Lauren had used it before. Ethan had bought it for her when she said she needed a place for personal business. Now he knew what that business was. Murder. Ethan parked 2 blocks away, watching the entrance. 2 black SUVs sat outside. Kane's men. Lauren had brought backup. She was careful, but not careful enough. Ethan turned to Riley. You said you could get me inside? Riley nodded. Yeah, but once we're in, there's no turning back. Ethan exhaled. There was never a way back. They moved. Fast. Silent. By the time they reached the building's rear entrance, Riley had already jammed the security cameras. Inside, voices echoed from the second floor. Ethan heard Lauren's laugh. Cold. Confident. It's done. By this time tomorrow, he'll be dead and buried. Ethan's fingers curled around his gun. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a death sentence. And now, it was her turn to be afraid. Plotline 21. The moment she realized. Lauren poured herself a drink, standing by the window, completely unaware. Ethan stepped into the room without a sound. He raised his gun. Lauren turned. And for the first time, her smile vanished. Ethan, she whispered. He cocked his head. Expecting someone else? Lauren's fingers tensed around her glass. You shouldn't be here. Ethan chuckled darkly. Neither should you. But then again, I didn't think I'd be waking up to find out my wife wanted me dead. Lauren exhaled. Then, she smirked. You always were slow, Ethan. Ethan's grip tightened on the trigger. Tell me why. Lauren shrugged, stepping closer. You were always the smartest man in the room. But you were too arrogant to see what was happening right in front of you. She leaned against the desk. You think I ever really loved you? Ethan stilled. Lauren's smirk grew. You were a means to an end, Ethan. Paycheck. A way into power. She sipped her drink, eyes gleaming. And now, you're just another loose end. Ethan exhaled slowly. Funny, he said. That's exactly what Kane said about you. Lauren froze. Ethan smirked. You really think he was going to let you walk away? A flicker of doubt crossed her face. For the first time, she looked afraid. Ethan stepped closer. Kane doesn't trust traitors. And if you were willing to betray me, he let the words hang. Lauren's fingers trembled. She opened her mouth. Then gunfire erupted downstairs. Ethan and Lauren both turned. The sound of screams, of men dying, and then, a familiar voice. Ethan. Victor Kane. Plotline 22. The devil himself. Kane stepped into the room, flanked by 3 armed men. Lauren's face drained of color. Victor, Kane smirked. Save it. He pulled out a cigar, lit it, then turned to Ethan. You've been a pain in my ass, Carter. Ethan kept his gun raised. Yeah? Well, you're not my favorite person either. Kane chuckled. Then he turned to Lauren. And you? Lauren took a step back. We had a deal, she whispered. Kane exhaled smoke. No, sweetheart. You had a job. And you failed. He gestured to his men. Clean this up. Lauren's eyes widened. She looked at Ethan. For the first time, she wasn't in control. She was the one about to be erased. Ethan, please. Ethan stared at her. His wife. The woman who had planned his murder. Now, she was begging him to save her. Kane smirked. What's it gonna be, Carter? Ethan exhaled. He had spent his whole life defending criminals, helping them escape justice. Now, he had a choice. Let Kane take Lauren, or pull the trigger himself. Lauren stared at him, pleading. Ethan took a slow breath. Then, he raised his gun, and made his decision. Mexico, 10:13 p.m., an offer he should refuse. Ethan stared at the phone in his hand. Victor Kane's voice still echoed in his head. How would you like to work for me? Ethan had spent years defending criminals. He had made his fortune protecting men like Kane. Now, Kane wasn't asking for protection. He was offering power. Ethan swirled the whiskey in his glass, staring at the dark ocean beyond the motel balcony. He had two options. Accept Kane's offer. Step into the world he had spent his career orbiting. Become something worse than a fixer. Become untouchable. Refuse. Try to disappear. Hope Kane didn't see that as a betrayal. Both paths led to the same place. There was no running from men like Victor Kane. So, Carter? Kane's voice drawled over the phone. What's it gonna be? Ethan exhaled. Where do we start? Kane chuckled. Smart man. Pack your bags. You're going to New Orleans. The line went dead. And just like that, Ethan Graves had made the worst decision of his life. Plotline 27. The City of Ghosts. 2 days later, Ethan landed in New Orleans. The moment he stepped off the plane, he knew this wasn't just a job. This was a test. Kane didn't trust him. Not yet. And the only way to prove himself. To survive whatever trap Kane had laid out. A black sedan waited outside the airport. A driver in a suit nodded to him. Mr. Graves. Get in. Ethan slid into the back seat. A woman sat inside, legs crossed, red lipstick, cold eyes. Ethan Graves, she mused. The lawyer who cheated death. Ethan studied her. And you are, she smiled. Marissa Vale. Ethan's pulse spiked. The name wasn't just familiar. It was dangerous. Marissa Vale was an enforcer, fixer, a woman who made people disappear. And now, she was here for him. Plotline 28. The first job. Kane wants to see if you're useful, Marissa said, passing Ethan a folder. Inside, a photo of a man. A name, Dr. Adrian Langston. A bio, political strategist. Wealthy, federal informant. Ethan clenched his jaw. You want me to defend him? Marissa smirked. No, Carter. We want you to make sure he loses. Ethan frowned. You want me to throw a case? Not just a case, Marissa said. His entire life. Ethan exhaled, flipping through the file. Langston wasn't just a politician. He had deep ties to the FBI, and Kane wanted him destroyed. Ethan stared at the file. This wasn't what he did. He bent the law, twisted it, but he had never deliberately ruined an innocent man. You have 3 days, Marissa said. Welcome to the job. She opened the door. And, Carter? Ethan looked up. If you try to run, Kane will find you. And I won't be so polite next time. Ethan stepped out into the humid Louisiana night. And for the first time since this all began, he wondered if he had just damned himself completely. Plotline 29. The Shadow of the Past. Ethan had spent his career navigating gray areas. But this was black and white. He had 3 days to find a way to destroy Langston, or Kane would destroy him. Ethan set up in a small hotel in the French Quarter, scanning the file again. Langston had secrets. Everyone did. But were they bad enough to justify what Kane wanted? As he dug deeper, he found something interesting. Langston had a daughter, 27, smart, off the grid. And the moment Ethan saw her name, his stomach dropped. Natalie Langston. A new identity. But there was no doubt. This was Natalie Carter. The same woman who had warned him back in Boston. The same woman who had been shot in front of him. The woman who was supposed to be dead. Ethan exhaled. This wasn't just a job. This was a setup. And he was right in the middle of it. Plotline 30. The meeting that shouldn't happen. Ethan didn't hesitate. He found an old contact, a hacker, and got Natalie's last known location. She was alive. And she was hiding. At 2:14 a.m., Ethan knocked on the door of a rundown motel outside the city. The door opened just an inch. A gun was aimed at his chest. Then, a whisper. Jesus Christ. The gun lowered. And Natalie Langston, stared at him wide-eyed. You should be dead, Ethan muttered. Natalie smirked. So should you. Ethan stepped inside. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was a war. New Orleans, 2:16 a.m., the dead woman who lived. Ethan stood in the dimly lit motel room, staring at the woman who wasn't supposed to exist. Natalie Langston, formerly Natalie Carter, the journalist who had exposed the truth about his wife, the woman who had been shot in front of him, was alive, and she was holding a gun to his chest. You should be dead, Ethan said again. Natalie's grip on the gun tightened. And you should be halfway to Mexico. Ethan smirked. Didn't take. Silence. Then Natalie lowered the gun. You shouldn't be here, Ethan. Neither should you. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. How did you find me? Ethan tossed the dossier onto the motel table. You didn't cover your tracks as well as you thought. Natalie flipped through the pages. When she saw the photo of her father, Adrian Langston, she froze. Ethan watched her reaction. Kane wants me to take him down. Natalie's jaw tightened. And you agreed? Ethan leaned against the wall. Not yet. Natalie shut the file, her fingers trembling. Ethan, you don't understand. My father, he's not just a politician. He's the last person standing between Kane and complete control. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So why are you hiding? Natalie's lips pressed into a thin line. Because I know something neither you nor Kane do. She turned to him. There's someone else pulling the strings. Plotline 31. The name that changes everything. Ethan's pulse spiked. Someone above Kane? Natalie nodded. Kane is powerful, but he's not the mastermind. He's just the hammer. Ethan's mind raced. Who's running the show? Natalie hesitated. Then, she pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. She turned the screen to Ethan. His blood ran cold. There was a name, a familiar one. Samuel Price. Ethan clenched his jaw. Price is dead. Natalie shook her head. No, Ethan. He's not. Plotline 32. The ghost in the system. Ethan's breathing slowed. Samuel Price, the former FBI director, the man who had helped cover up Kane's crimes, the man who had been found dead in his hotel room weeks ago, wasn't dead. That's impossible, Ethan muttered. Natalie scoffed. Is it? You thought I was dead too. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. So what does this mean? Natalie's eyes darkened. It means that you and I are about to become the most wanted people in America. She pulled up another file. This is the real game, Ethan. Kane's just the muscle. Price is the brain. Ethan exhaled. And Langston? Natalie stiffened. He's the bait. Plotline 33. The trap. Ethan and Natalie sat in silence. The pieces were falling into place, but one thing still didn't make sense. Why does Price want your father gone? Ethan asked. Natalie hesitated. Then she reached into her duffel bag and pulled out a flash drive. Because he has this. Ethan took it, rolling it between his fingers. And what exactly is on here? Natalie met his gaze. Proof that Kane and Price are working together to dismantle the U.S. intelligence network. They don't just want control of Boston, Ethan. They want the whole system. Ethan clenched his jaw. And Langston is the only one standing in their way. Natalie nodded. If he dies, there's no stopping them. Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So let me get this straight. He held up his fingers, counting. Kane hired me to ruin Langston, thinking I wouldn't ask questions. One finger down. But in reality, Langston has evidence that could destroy Kane and Price. Another finger. And if I do what Kane wants, I help Price take full control. The last finger fell. He laughed dryly. This just keeps getting better. Natalie watched him carefully. So what's the play, Ethan? Ethan tapped the flash drive against the table. We don't just protect Langston. He smirked. We flip the game on them. Natalie raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do we do that? Ethan's smirk widened. We make Price think we're working for him. Plotline 34. The con. By morning, Ethan had a plan. He was going to play both sides. Make Kane and Price believe he was carrying out their orders while secretly protecting Langston. Natalie wasn't convinced. You really think you can outmaneuver Kane and Price at the same time? Ethan exhaled. I don't have a choice. Natalie studied him. Then finally, she nodded. All right, let's burn the house down. Plotline 35. The first move. Ethan picked up his phone and dialed. Victor Kane answered on the second ring. Carter. Good news, I hope. Ethan forced a smirk. Langston's going down. But I need more time. Kane exhaled. Time is something I don't have, Carter. Ethan leaned against the motel wall. Then let's make this faster. Let's make it public. Silence. Then Kane chuckled. Go on. Ethan's pulse pounded. Give me a press conference. Let me bury Langston on national television. You want him destroyed? Let's make sure he never recovers. Kane hummed in approval. You're finally thinking like me, Carter. Ethan smirked. Someone has to. They hung up. Natalie exhaled. You just signed your death warrant. Ethan pocketed his phone. Not if I kill them first. Natalie stared at him. You really think you can outplay Price? Ethan smirked. I don't think, Natalie. I know. Because for the first time since this all began, he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was hunting. New Orleans, 7:45 a.m. A plan built on lies. Ethan Graves was done playing defense. For weeks he had been a target. A pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. Now, he was rewriting the rules. Natalie paced the motel room, arms crossed. I still don't trust this. Ethan smirked, pouring himself a drink. Good. That means it's working. He had just sold Victor Kane on a press conference, a trap. And if Kane believed it, Samuel Price would too. Because the best way to take down two enemies? Make them turn on each other. Plotline 36. A press conference with no truth. By noon, the media was swarming. The press conference had been fast-tracked. Langston had no idea, but within hours, Ethan would be standing in front of the country, burying him. At least that's what Kane thought. But Ethan had no intention of taking Langston down. This wasn't about destroying the senator. This was about exposing the real threat. Price, Kane, the entire syndicate. Ethan glanced at Natalie. You still have your contacts? She nodded. Some. Why? Ethan's smirk widened. Because by the time I step on that stage, I want every major news outlet in the country watching. Plotline 37. The meeting before the storm. Ethan knew Kane wouldn't be patient. Sure enough, an hour before the press conference, a black SUV pulled up outside the hotel. Ethan slid into the passenger seat. Kane sat in the back, his expression calm. Too calm. You ready for this, Carter? Kane asked. Ethan smirked. Ready as I'll ever be. Kane studied him. I don't like surprises, Carter. So tell me, do I need to worry about you? Ethan's heart slowed. This was it. One wrong answer and Kane wouldn't let him leave that car alive. Ethan chuckled. Worry about me? No, Victor. You should be worried about what happens to Langston when I'm done. Kane's smirk returned. Good answer. Ethan forced himself to breathe. He had just bought himself a few more hours. But when the time came, Kane wouldn't see the knife until it was already in his back. Plotline 38. The press conference that changed everything. 2 p.m. The room was packed. Cameras, reporters, live streams across every major network. Ethan adjusted his tie, stepping onto the stage. He could see Langston in the crowd, watching him with wary eyes. Kane's men stood at the back, ready to execute him if he stepped out of line. And somewhere Price was watching, waiting. This was his moment. Ethan cleared his throat. The world was listening. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today because I believe in the truth. A pause. The truth is, Senator Adrian Langston is not who he says he is. Murmurs. Langston's jaw tightened. Kane smirked in the shadows. Ethan continued. For weeks, I've been investigating Langston, and I found something bigger than I ever imagined. Silence. The tension was razor thin. Ethan took a deep breath, and then he turned the tables. The truth is, this isn't about Langston. Kane's smirk vanished. Natalie, watching from the wings, tensed. Ethan steeled himself. This is about a hidden hand. A power that has been pulling the strings in this country for far too long. Gasps. Confusion. Kane's men shifted. The real enemy isn't Langston. Ethan looked directly at the camera. It's the man who tried to have me killed. The man who orchestrated everything. A pause. Then, Samuel Price. The entire room exploded. Kane's expression darkened. Because now, the world wasn't looking at Langston. They were looking at Price. And in that moment, Ethan had just started a war. Plotline 39, the fallout. Ethan walked off the stage, heart pounding. He had seconds before everything went to hell. Kane's men were already moving. Natalie grabbed his wrist. Run. But before they could move, gunshots erupted. The crowd screamed. Security rushed in. Ethan spun, just in time to see one of Kane's men drop. Killed. By a sniper. Natalie cursed. It's Price's people. Ethan grabbed her wrist. Move. They barely made it out the side exit before the entire building was in chaos. But as Ethan sprinted toward the getaway car, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered, breathless. A familiar voice. Calm. Controlled. Deadly. You just made a very big mistake, Carter. Ethan stopped cold. Samuel Price was alive. And now, he was coming for him. Plotline 40. The dead man who lived. You should be dead, Ethan muttered. Price chuckled. You should be smarter. Ethan gritted his teeth. You set this up. Of course I did. Ethan could hear sirens in the distance. The news was already reporting it. I needed someone to take Kane off the board. And you just did it for me. Ethan's blood ran cold. Price had played him. He wanted Kane dead. And now the whole world believed Kane was the villain. Which meant Price was free to take everything. Ethan clenched his fists. What do you want? Price exhaled. To finish what we started. Ethan stayed silent. Price continued. You wanted a way out, Carter? Here it is. You work for me now. Ethan laughed bitterly. Or what? A pause. Then Price's voice turned ice cold. Or I kill everyone you care about. Silence. Then, you have 24 hours to decide. The line went dead. Ethan stood there, breathless, heart pounding. Price wasn't a ghost. He was a king. And now, Ethan had a choice. Serve him, or burn him to the ground. But one thing was certain. This game was far from over. New Orleans, 8:12 p.m., the final choice. Ethan Graves had spent his career defending the worst criminals in America. But now, he was standing between two devils. On one side, Victor Kane, the crime boss he had double-crossed. Dead. Exposed by Ethan's press conference. On the other, Samuel Price, the ghost of the FBI, the man who had manipulated everyone from the start. And now, Price had given Ethan a choice. Join him, or die. Ethan sat in a dark motel room, gripping his gun. Natalie paced in front of him, her expression unreadable. You can't actually be considering this. Ethan exhaled. I don't see another way. Natalie stopped pacing. You always see another way. Ethan met her gaze. She was right. Price had spent years controlling people like chess pieces. If Ethan was going to survive, he had to flip the board. Plotline 41, the plan that could kill them. Ethan dialed a number. Price picked up on the second ring. Have you made your decision? Ethan smirked. Yeah, I want in. Silence. Then Price laughed. Good. I knew you were smarter than Kane. Ethan's jaw clenched. What's my first job? Not a job, Carter. A test. Ethan already knew what was coming. Who do you want me to kill? Price paused. Then, Natalie Langston. Ethan's stomach dropped. Natalie stiffened. She had heard everything. Price's voice was calm. I want proof she's dead by morning. The line went dead. Natalie exhaled. You're not actually going to do it. Ethan looked at her. No. But Price has to think I did. Natalie crossed her arms. And how do you plan on pulling that off? Ethan smirked. We're going to fake your death. And then, we're going to kill Samuel Price. Plotline 42. The long con. Ethan needed two things. A body. A witness to confirm Natalie was dead. That's where Riley Knox came in. Riley was a cleaner. A professional at making people disappear. Ethan met her in a warehouse outside the city. She leaned against her car, lighting a cigarette. You want me to stage a murder for the most dangerous man in the country? Ethan smirked. That's exactly what I want. Riley exhaled smoke. And what do I get in return? Ethan held up a USB drive. Everything on Price. Bank accounts. Offshore holdings. Names of every agent on his payroll. Riley's eyes narrowed. Then she smiled. Damn, Carter. You might actually pull this off. She took the drive. You've got 24 hours. Don't screw it up. Plotline 43. The death of Natalie Langston. That night, the news broke. Investigative journalist Natalie Langston found dead in motel shooting. Police reports. Crime scene photos. A burned-out car with an unrecognizable body inside. All planted by Riley. Price took the bait. Within minutes, Ethan got the call. Good work, Carter, Price said. When do I meet you? Ethan asked. Price chuckled. You don't. But I have your first real job. Get to DC. The next phase begins tomorrow. Ethan's pulse spiked. Price had no idea Ethan was planning to kill him. This was his shot. One chance. One bullet. To end everything. Plotline 44. The final move. Washington, D.C. Ethan sat at a bar waiting. Price had sent a car for him. But Ethan had sent someone else first. The black SUV pulled up. A man stepped out. Samuel Price. He walked into the bar, taking a seat across from Ethan. I expected more resistance, Price said. Ethan smirked. Why resist when I can win? Price chuckled. I like you, Carter. You remind me of myself. Ethan's jaw clenched. That's why I'm giving you a gift, Price continued. A way out. Real power. Ethan leaned forward. And what do you get? Price smiled. Loyalty. Ethan exhaled. Well, about that. Price's smile faltered. Ethan slid a phone across the table. A live-streamed video of Natalie Langston. Alive. You should have made sure she was dead, Ethan said. Price's eyes widened. And then, bang. Ethan pulled the trigger under the table. The bullet ripped through Price's chest. He slumped forward, choking on blood. Ethan leaned in. Checkmate, you son of a bitch. Price tried to speak, but he was already dead. Epilogue. The ghost who walked away. Ethan walked out of the bar, heart pounding. A black SUV pulled up. Natalie was behind the wheel. She smirked. It's done. Ethan exhaled. Yeah, it's done. The syndicate was dead. Price was gone. Victor Kane was rotting in the ground. And Ethan Graves? For the first time in his life, he was free. Natalie glanced at him. So what now? Ethan smirked. Now, we disappear. The car pulled away, disappearing into the night. And just like that, the most dangerous man in America became a ghost. The end.